What would you do if you found a note that could change your life forever? For Sarah Thompson, a 28-year-old veterinary technician from a small town in Connecticut, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in April. Sarah had always been passionate about animals, but her life was far from extraordinary. She lived in a modest apartment, drove a beat-up Honda Civic, and spent her weekends volunteering at the local animal shelter. Little did she know that her world was about to be turned upside down. It all started when she received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Hello, is this Sarah Thompson?" A deep voice inquired. "This is Mr. Blackwell from Blackwell and Associates law firm. I'm calling regarding the estate of Mr. Cornelius Hawthorne. Your presence is required at the reading of his will tomorrow at 2 p.m. Sarah's mind raced. Cornelius Hawthorne? The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. "I'm sorry, but I think there must be some mistake," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know any Cornelius Hawthorne." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ms. Thompson, did you by any chance work at the Sunny Pines retirement home about 5 years ago?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Yes, I did. I was a part-time caregiver there during college. But what does that have to do with anything?" Mr. Blackwell cleared his throat. "Mr. Hawthorne was a resident there during your tenure. He specifically named you in his will. It's crucial that you attend the reading tomorrow." As the call ended, Sarah's head spun with questions. Who was Cornelius Hawthorne? Why would he include her in his will? And what could he possibly have left her? The next day, Sarah found herself in the plush offices of Blackwell and Associates, surrounded by elegantly dressed strangers who eyed her suspiciously. She felt out of place in her scrubs, having come straight from work. Mr. Blackwell, a stern-looking man in his 60s, began reading the will. Sarah listened, her heart pounding, as he listed off various bequests of family members and charities. Then, suddenly he paused, his eyebrows raising slightly. "And to Sarah Thompson, the kind-hearted girl who brought joy to my final years, I leave my most prized possession, my beloved African gray parrot Polly. Along with Polly, I bequeath my entire estate, including my mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, and all its contents." The room erupted in chaos. Sarah sat there, stunned, as angry voices rose around her. A well-dressed woman who had been introduced as Cornelius's niece, Victoria, stood up, her face red with fury. "This is preposterous," she shouted. "You can't possibly be serious. We're talking about billions of dollars here." Mr. Blackwell raised his hand for silence. "The will is clear and legally binding. Ms. Thompson is now the sole heir to the Hawthorne fortune, with the stipulation that she must care for Polly for the remainder of the bird's natural life." As the reality of the situation began to sink in, Sarah felt a mix of emotions wash over her. Excitement, fear, confusion, and a strange sense of responsibility. She remembered Cornelius now, a kind old man who always had a twinkle in his eye when she came to visit. But why would he leave her everything? Just then, a small cage was brought into the room, and Sarah found herself face to face with Polly. The parrot tilted its head, fixing her with an intelligent gaze. "Hello, Sarah," it squawked. "Big trouble coming." Those words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Little did she know, they were about to become all too prophetic. As she left the law office, clutching Polly's cage and a folder full of documents, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn into uncharted territory. The rain had stopped, and the sun was peeking through the clouds, but storm clouds were gathering on the horizon of Sarah's future. What secrets did Polly hold? Why had Cornelius chosen her for this incredible inheritance? And what did the parrot mean by big trouble coming? Sarah's journey was just beginning, and the answers to these questions would lead her down a path filled with danger, intrigue, and a truth more shocking than she could ever imagine. Sarah's first night in the Hawthorne mansion was anything but restful. The sprawling Newport estate, with its marble floors and antique furnishings, felt more like a museum than a home. As she lay in the massive four-poster bed, the enormity of her situation weighed heavily on her mind. A soft tick-tick-tick sound drew her attention to the window. There, perched on an ornate stand, was Polly. The parrot's eyes gleamed in the moonlight, unervingly intelligent. "Trouble, Sarah. Big trouble," Polly repeated, causing Sarah to sit up straight. "What do you mean, Polly?" she asked, feeling slightly foolish for expecting a coherent answer from a bird. To her amazement, Polly tilted his head and spoke again, this time in a perfect imitation of Cornelius Hawthorne's voice. "The truth lies in the library, behind the portrait of Elizabeth." Sarah's heart raced. Was this just random mimicry or something more? She grabbed her phone, using its flashlight to navigate the dark hallways. The library was easy to find, a massive room lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books. And there, above the fireplace, hung a portrait of a stern-looking woman labeled Elizabeth Hawthorne, 1892, with trembling hands. Sarah lifted the heavy frame. Behind it was a small wall safe. She tried the handle, but it was locked. What was the combination? As if in answer, Polly's voice echoed from down the hall. 1892. The safe clicked open, revealing a leather-bound journal and a USB drive. Sarah's hand shook as she opened the journal to its first page. To whomever Polly has chosen, if you're reading this, then the bird has deemed you worthy of the truth. But be warned, this knowledge comes at a great cost. The Hawthorne legacy is built on secrets darker than you can imagine. Before Sarah could read further, a noise from downstairs made her freeze. Footsteps. Someone else was in the house. Quickly, she shoved the journal and USB drive into her pajama pockets and rushed back to her room, heart pounding. She barely made it before she heard voices in the hallway. "We need to find those documents," a man whispered urgently. "The old man must have hidden them somewhere in this house." "What about the girl?" A woman's voice replied. Sarah recognized it as Victoria, Cornelius's niece. "We'll deal with her if we have to," the man said coldly. "No one can know the truth about Hawthorne Industries." Sarah's blood ran cold. What had she stumbled into? As the voices faded, she turned to Polly, who was watching her intently. "Trust no one," the parrot squawked softly. The next morning, Sarah awoke to find the mansion buzzing with activity. A team of lawyers, led by Mr. Blackwell, had arrived to help her settle into her new role. As she descended the grand staircase, Victoria approached her with a saccharine smile. "Sarah, darling, I hope you'll forgive my outburst yesterday. It was just such a shock, you understand. We're all family here, and we want to help you adjust." Sarah forced a smile, remembering Polly's warning. "That's very kind of you, Victoria. I'm still trying to process everything myself." Victoria linked her arm through Sarah's, steering her towards the dining room. "Of course, dear. It must be overwhelming. Why don't we have breakfast and discuss how we can assist you in managing Uncle Cornelius's affairs?" As they entered the dining room, Sarah found herself face to face with a group of impeccably dressed individuals, Hawthorne family members and business associates, all eyeing her with barely concealed interest and, in some cases, hostility. A tall, distinguished-looking man stood up, extending his hand. "Ms. Thompson, I'm Jonathan Hawthorne, Cornelius's younger brother and CEO of Hawthorne Industries. We're all eager to help you navigate this unexpected situation." Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and calculating look in his eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. I appreciate any guidance you can offer." As breakfast progressed, Sarah found herself bombarded with questions about her background, her relationship with Cornelius, and her plans for the estate. She answered as vaguely as possible, acutely aware of the journal and USB drive hidden in her room. Midway through the meal, Polly flew into the room, landing on Sarah's shoulder. The conversation abruptly halted, all eyes fixed on the bird. "Everything okay, Sarah?" Polly asked in Cornelius's voice, causing several people to gasp. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "Fascinating creature. You know, Sarah, managing a pet like Polly can be quite challenging. Perhaps it would be best if we found a more suitable home for him. Before Sarah could respond, Polly squawked loudly, "The King's Gambit. Checkmate in 3 moves." An elderly man at the far end of the table dropped his fork with a clatter. "Good God!" he whispered. "That's impossible." Sarah looked at him quizzically. "I'm sorry, what's impossible?" The man, introduced earlier as Dr. Howard Finch, a longtime friend of Cornelius, shook his head in disbelief. "That phrase, it was the final move in a chess game, Cornelius, and I played the night before he died. No one else knew about it. How could the bird?" A tense silence fell over the room. Sarah felt the weight of suspicious glares upon her. Victoria broke the silence with a forced laugh. "Well, parrots are known for their remarkable memory, aren't they? Now, Sarah dear, we really must discuss the upcoming charity gala. As the new head of the Hawthorne Foundation, you'll be expected to attend." As the conversation resumed, Sarah's mind raced. What other secrets did Polly hold? And why did it feel like everyone in this room was playing an elaborate game of chess, with her as an unwitting pawn? Later that afternoon, as Sarah explored the grounds of the estate, she found herself in a secluded rose garden. To her surprise, Dr. Finch was there, pruning a bush with careful precision. "Ms. Thompson," he said without looking up, "I've been hoping to speak with you privately." Sarah approached cautiously. "Dr. Finch, is everything all right?" The old man sighed, finally meeting her gaze. "No, my dear, I'm afraid it isn't. That bird, Polly, he knows things he shouldn't. Things only Cornelius knew." "What are you saying?" Sarah asked, her heart beginning to race. Dr. Finch looked around nervously before leaning in close. "Cornelius was working on something revolutionary before he died, something that could change the world, but it also made him powerful enemies. I fear that's why he—" Suddenly, a twig snapped nearby. Dr. Finch straightened up, his expression changing instantly. But listen to me ramble. Gardening is wonderful therapy, don't you think, Miss Thompson?" As he hurried away, Sarah stood rooted to the spot, her mind whirling. What was Dr. Finch about to reveal? And who had interrupted them? Back in her room, Sarah finally found a moment to examine the USB drive. As she plugged it into her laptop, a single video file appeared. With trembling fingers, she clicked play. Cornelius Hawthorne's face filled the screen, his eyes intense and serious. "If you're watching this, then Polly has chosen you as my successor. But before you go any further, you must understand the gravity of what you're about to learn. The truth about Hawthorne Industries, about my family's legacy, and about a discovery that could reshape humanity's future. Once you know, there's no going back. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" The video ended, leaving Sarah with a choice that would alter the course of her life forever. As she pondered her decision, Polly's voice echoed ominously from his perch. "The game begins. Choose wisely, Sarah. Lives depend on it. What secrets lay hidden in Cornelius's journal? What earth-shattering discovery had he made? And most importantly, who could Sarah trust in this nest of vipers she now found herself in?" As night fell over the Hawthorne estate, Sarah realized that her adventure was only just beginning, and that the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. The next morning, Sarah awoke to a cacophony of raised voices echoing through the mansion. Hastily throwing on a robe, she crept down the grand staircase, careful to remain out of sight. "This is unacceptable." Jonathan Hawthorne's voice boomed from the study. "How could our security team let this happen?" Victoria's shrill tones cut through the air. "We need to contain the situation immediately. If word gets out..." "If word gets out about what?" Sarah interjected, stepping into view. The room fell silent. Jonathan, Victoria, and Mr. Blackwell stared at her, their faces a mix of surprise and barely concealed anger. Jonathan recovered first, plastering on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sarah, good morning. I'm afraid we have some unfortunate news. There was a break-in last night. Nothing seems to be missing, but we're concerned about sensitive company documents that your uncle kept here, Victoria finished, her gaze sharp. Sarah's mind raced. The journal, the USB drive. Had someone been looking for them? Mr. Blackwell cleared his throat. Ms. Thompson, in light of this incident, we believe it would be best if you allowed us to implement stricter security measures. For your own safety, of course. The implication was clear. They wanted to control her movements, to watch her every step. Sarah forced a smile. I appreciate your concern, but I'm quite comfortable with the current arrangements. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on Polly. As she turned to leave, Jonathan called out, Sarah, there's a board meeting this afternoon. As the new majority shareholder, your presence is expected. The weight of her newfound responsibilities settled heavily on Sarah's shoulders as she made her way back to her room. There, she found Polly perched by the window, his beady eyes following her movements. Trust no one, the parrot repeated, this time in Cornelius's voice. The truth is in the numbers. Sarah's brow furrowed. What numbers, Polly? What are you trying to tell me? But the bird merely tilted its head, remaining frustratingly silent. With a sigh, Sarah turned to the journal she had hidden beneath her mattress. As she flipped through the pages, her eyes widened. The entire book was filled with complex equations, chemical formulas, and cryptic notes. One page caught her attention. Project Lazarus. Phase 3 successful. Neural pathways mapped and stored. Ethical implications significant. Cannot let this fall into the wrong hands. Before Sarah could delve deeper, a soft knock at the door made her jump. She quickly hid the journal and opened the door to find Dr. Finch standing there, looking nervous. Miss Thompson, may I have a word? He asked, glancing furtively down the hallway. Sarah ushered him in, closing the door behind them. Dr. Finch, what's going on? You seemed like you wanted to tell me something yesterday. The old man sank into a chair, his face lined with worry. Sarah, I've known Cornelius for over 40 years. We worked together on countless projects, but his last, it was unlike anything we'd ever attempted. What was it? Sarah pressed, leaning forward. Dr. Finch took a deep breath. Cornelius found a way to map and store human consciousness. To transfer a person's entire being, memories, personality, everything, into a digital format. Sarah's mind reeled. But that's impossible. We thought so too, until we succeeded, Dr. Finch replied, his voice barely above a whisper. But the implications, the potential for abuse. Cornelius realized we'd opened Pandora's box. He wanted to destroy the research, but others saw it as the ultimate tool for power and profit. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as the pieces began to fall into place. Dr. Finch, are you saying that Cornelius? The old scientist nodded gravely. I believe Cornelius found a way to preserve his consciousness. And I think... He glanced at Polly. I think he found a unique way to hide it. Before Sarah could process this earth-shattering revelation, alarms blared throughout the mansion. The sound of breaking glass and heavy footsteps echoed from below. Dr. Finch's eyes widened in panic. They're here. We need to go now. Sarah grabbed her backpack, stuffing the journal and USB drive inside. She reached for Polly, but the bird was already on her shoulder, as if sensing the danger. As they rushed down the hallway, Sarah's mind raced. Who were they? The Hawthorne family? Corporate rivals? Government agents? They had almost reached the back staircase when a figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking their path. It was Jonathan Hawthorne, a gun in his hand. I'm sorry it had to come to this, Sarah, he said, his voice cold. But we can't let Cornelius's little science experiment ruin everything we built. Dr. Finch stepped in front of Sarah protectively. Jonathan, think about what you're doing. This technology could change the world for the better. Jonathan's laugh was bitter. Change the world? It will destroy everything. Immortality for the highest bidder? The rich and powerful living forever, while the rest of humanity withers away. No! It's better if this discovery dies here. As Jonathan raised his gun, time seemed to slow. Sarah's heart pounded in her ears. She closed her eyes, bracing for the worst. But the shot never came. Instead, Polly let out an ear-piercing shriek, launching himself at Jonathan's face. In the confusion, Dr. Finch tackled the younger man, sending the gun skittering across the floor. "Run, Sarah," Dr. Finch yelled, struggling with Jonathan. "Get out of here. Find Agent Martinez at the FBI field office in Boston. Tell her Operation Phoenix is compromised. Go!" With tears in her eyes, Sarah ran, Polly flying close behind. She raced down the back stairs and out into the sprawling gardens, the sound of shouting and gunfire echoing behind her. As she reached the edge of the property, Sarah spotted a groundskeeper's golf cart. Without hesitation, she jumped in, Polly landing on the seat beside her. The engine roared to life, and they sped away from the mansion, leaving behind the only life Sarah had ever known. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions. What had Cornelius really discovered? How was Polly connected to all of this? And who could she trust now that her world had been turned upside down? As they drove into the unknown, Polly spoke once more, this time in a voice that was a perfect blend of Cornelius and the parrot. "The journey begins, Sarah. The fate of the world rests in your hands now." The weight of that responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders as she drove towards Boston, unaware that her actions in the coming days would not only change her life, but potentially alter the course of human history itself. What other secrets did Cornelius's research hold? Who else was after this revolutionary technology? And how was Sarah, a former veterinary technician, supposed to safeguard something she barely understood? As the Hawthorne mansion faded in the rearview mirror, Sarah realized that her ordinary life was gone forever. She was now at the center of a storm that threatened to reshape the very fabric of human existence. And somewhere in the depths of Polly's avian brain, the key to it all was hidden, waiting to be unlocked. The real adventure was just beginning, and Sarah Thompson was about to discover that in a world of secrets and betrayals, the only one she could truly trust might not be human at all. The sun was setting as Sarah's stolen golf cart sputtered to a stop on the outskirts of a small town in Massachusetts. Her heart was still racing, adrenaline pumping through her veins as the events of the past few hours replayed in her mind. "We need to find a way to Boston," Sarah muttered, more to herself than to Polly, who was perched on the cart's steering wheel. "Phone booth, 2 blocks north," Polly squawked, startling Sarah. She looked at the bird in amazement. "How do you—" "Never mind." Following Polly's directions, Sarah found the phone booth. With shaking hands, she dialed the operator and asked for the FBI field office in Boston. "This is Agent Martinez," a crisp female voice answered. Sarah took a deep breath. "Agent Martinez, my name is Sarah Thompson. Dr. Howard Finch told me to contact you. He said to tell you that Operation Phoenix is compromised." There was a long pause on the other end. When Agent Martinez spoke again, her voice was tense. "Ms. Thompson, where are you right now?" Sarah glanced around. A small town. I think the sign said Millbrook. "Stay where you are. I'm sending a team to extract you. Do not speak to anyone else. Trust no one." The line went dead, leaving Sarah with a mixture of relief and apprehension. As she stepped out of the phone booth, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Across the street, a man in a dark suit was watching her intently. "Sarah, run!" Polly screeched. Without hesitation, Sarah bolted, the parrot flying close behind. She could hear footsteps pounding the pavement behind her as she darted down an alley, her lungs burning. Suddenly, a sleek black SUV screeched to a halt at the end of the alley. The door flew open, and a woman with short dark hair and intense eyes beckoned urgently. "Ms. Thompson, get in." Sarah hesitated for a split second before diving into the vehicle, Polly right behind her. As soon as the door slammed shut, the SUV peeled away, leaving their pursuer in the dust. Agent Martinez, the woman introduced herself, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. Are you hurt? Sarah shook her head, still trying to catch her breath. No, I'm okay. But Dr. Finch, I don't know if he... Martinez's expression tightened. We'll do everything we can for Dr. Finch. Right now, our priority is getting you to safety. As they sped towards Boston, Sarah's mind whirled with questions. Agent Martinez, what's going on? What is Operation Phoenix? And how is Polly involved in all of this? The agent glanced at the parrot, who was watching the exchange with unnerving intelligence. Ms. Thompson, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Operation Phoenix was a joint project between the FBI and a secret division of Hawthorne Industries. Dr. Cornelius Hawthorne discovered a way to map and store human consciousness digitally. Sarah nodded. Dr. Finch told me about that. But what does it have to do with Polly? Martinez took a deep breath. Cornelius didn't just map consciousness. He found a way to transfer it. And when he realized how dangerous this technology could be in the wrong hands, he made a decision that would change everything. Sarah's eyes widened as the implications hit her. She turned to look at Polly, who met her gaze with an eerily familiar twinkle in his eye. Are you saying that Polly is... Hello, Sarah, the parrot said, in a perfect imitation of Cornelius Hawthorne's voice. I'm sorry for all the secrecy, but I had to be sure you were the right person to trust with this knowledge. Sarah felt like the world was spinning around her. But how? Why? The human brain is too complex, too easily read, Polly Cornelius explained. But an avian brain, restructured to hold human consciousness, it was the perfect hiding place. I transferred my consciousness into Polly, along with all my memories and knowledge of Project Lazarus. Agent Martinez nodded grimly. Cornelius knew that if his discovery fell into the wrong hands, it could lead to a world where the wealthy and powerful could essentially live forever, transferring their consciousness from body to body. The implications for society, for the very concept of human life, were staggering. Sarah's mind reeled with the implications. So, when Cornelius left everything to me in his will, he was ensuring that his life's work, and the key to protecting it, would be entrusted to someone with the compassion and integrity to make the right choices, Polly Cornelius finished. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the SUV. Martinez swerved, fighting to keep control as bullets peppered the vehicle. They've found us, the agent shouted, accelerating hard. Hold on. As they weaved through traffic, Sarah clutched Polly close, her heart pounding. Who was after them? The Hawthorne family? Corporate rivals? Or something even more sinister? Martinez's voice was tense as she spoke into her calm. This is Agent Martinez. We're under attack on I-95, requesting immediate backup and air support. The chase continued through the streets of Boston, their pursuers gaining ground with each passing moment. Just when it seemed they might escape, a black sedan rammed them from behind, sending their SUV into a wild spin. The world tilted and blurred as the vehicle flipped, glass shattering around them. Sarah felt a sharp pain in her head, and then everything went black. When she came to, Sarah found herself in a dimly lit room, strapped to a chair. Her head throbbed, and she could taste blood in her mouth. Panic rose in her throat as she realized Polly was nowhere to be seen. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Jonathan Hawthorne, his face a mask of cold determination. I'm truly sorry it's come to this, Sarah, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. But you've left us no choice. Now, you're going to tell us everything you know about Project Lazarus and where Cornelius hid the data. Sarah's mind raced. Where was Polly? What had happened to Agent Martinez? And how could she protect a secret that could reshape the very nature of human existence? As Jonathan loomed over her, Sarah realized that her ordeal was far from over. In fact, the true test of her courage and resolve was only just beginning. What tortures awaited her in this hidden facility? Could she resist long enough for help to arrive? And even if she escaped, how could she hope to safeguard a technology that had already cost so many lives? The fate of Cornelius's revolutionary discovery, and perhaps the future of humanity itself, now rested squarely on Sarah's shoulders. And as the first waves of pain washed over her, she steeled herself for the battle ahead, knowing that the choices she made in the coming hours would echo through history. Sarah's world had narrowed to a pinpoint of pain and defiance. Hours blended into what felt like days as Jonathan Hawthorne and his associates tried to break her will. They alternated between threats, psychological manipulation, and more physical methods of persuasion. But through it all, Sarah clung to one thought. She had to protect Polly and the secret he carried. "You're only making this harder on yourself," Jonathan said, his voice a mixture of frustration and grudging admiration. "Just tell us where Cornelius hid the data, and this can all be over." Sarah, her face bruised and her spirit battered but unbroken, managed a weak smile. "You still don't get it, do you? The data isn't hidden in some computer or safe. It's alive." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Before Sarah could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. The door burst open, and a panicked guard rushed in. "Sir, we're under attack. It's the FBI, and, sir, you're not going to believe this, but there's a flock of birds causing chaos in the security systems." Jonathan's face paled. "Impossible," he whispered. Taking advantage of the distraction, Sarah summoned her remaining strength. She kicked out, catching Jonathan off guard and sending him stumbling into the guard. In the ensuing chaos, she managed to free herself from the chair and bolt from the room. The hallways were a maze of flashing lights and blaring sirens. Sarah ran, her heart pounding, every muscle screaming in protest. She rounded a corner and came face to face with Agent Martinez, looking worse for wear, but very much alive. "Sarah, thank God," Martinez exclaimed, grabbing her arm. "We need to move now." As they raced through the facility, Sarah saw scenes of utter pandemonium. Guards were battling not just FBI agents, but also an impossibly coordinated assault of birds, pigeons, seagulls, and even a few escaped parrots from a nearby aviary. "Polly?" Sarah gasped, understanding dawning. Martinez nodded grimly. Turns out, Cornelius's consciousness transfer had some unexpected side effects. He can communicate with and influence other birds to a certain degree. "It's how we found you." They burst out of the building into the cool night air. A helicopter waited nearby, its rotors already spinning. As they sprinted towards it, Sarah heard a familiar squawk. Polly swooped down, landing on her shoulder. "Sarah, you're alive!" Polly Cornelius's voice was filled with relief. Once safely in the air, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax slightly. She turned to Martinez, her expression serious. "What happens now?" The agent's face was grim. "The situation is more complicated than we initially thought. Hawthorne Industries has deep connections in the government. There are powerful people who want to get their hands on this technology, believing they can control it. But they can't," Sarah finished. "If this gets out, if people realize they can potentially live forever by transferring their consciousness, it would upend the very foundations of society." Polly Cornelius chimed in. "Imagine a world where the wealthy elite could essentially become immortal, accumulating power and resources over centuries. The gap between the haves and have-nots would become insurmountable." Sarah's mind reeled at the implications. "So what do we do?" Martinez leaned forward, her voice low. "We have a safe house prepared, a place where you and Polly can lie low while we work on exposing Hawthorne Industries and their conspirators. But it won't be easy, and it won't be safe. I didn't ask for any of this," Sarah said softly, stroking Polly's feathers. "No one ever does," Polly Cornelius replied. "But sometimes the most important responsibilities find us, rather than the other way around." As the helicopter flew through the night, Sarah realized that her life had irrevocably changed. She was now the guardian of a secret that could reshape humanity's future, for better or worse. The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming, but as she looked at Polly and thought of all they'd been through, she knew she couldn't walk away. The safe house turned out to be a remote cabin in the Adirondack Mountains. As Sarah settled in, Martinez briefed her on the next steps. "We'll be monitoring communications, trying to identify everyone involved in this conspiracy. But we need hard evidence to bring them down." The journal, Sarah remembered suddenly. Cornelius's journal. I had it with me when we escaped the mansion. Martinez's eyes lit up. Where is it now? Sarah's heart sank as she realized she had lost track of it during their flight and capture. I don't know. I must have dropped it during the chase or at the facility. Polly ruffled his feathers. Not to worry. I memorized every page. Together, we can reconstruct it. And so began a painstaking process of recreating Cornelius's research. Sarah worked day and night, transcribing Polly's recitations and trying to make sense of the complex formulas and theories. As the pieces started coming together, she began to grasp the true magnitude of what Cornelius had discovered. It's not just about transferring consciousness, Sarah mused one evening, staring at pages of notes. This technology could potentially cure neurological diseases, enhance human cognition, even bring back the dead, in a sense. Which is precisely why it's so dangerous. Polly Cornelius replied, in the right hands, it could usher in a new era of human evolution. In the wrong hands, it could lead to unimaginable tyranny, Sarah finished. Weeks turned into months. Sarah's understanding of the technology grew, as did her resolve to protect it. But as they made progress, a new worry began to gnaw at her. Polly, she asked one day, what happens to you, to Cornelius's consciousness, when this is all over? Is there a way to transfer you back to a human body? The parrot was silent for a long moment. I'm not sure, Sarah. And truthfully, I'm not certain I would want to. This experience has given me a unique perspective. Perhaps this is where I'm meant to be now. The conversation was interrupted by the sudden arrival of Agent Martinez, her face grave. We've been compromised. They're coming. We need to move now. As they rushed to pack essential documents, an explosion rocked the cabin. Through the window, Sarah could see armed men approaching through the trees. Go! Martinez shouted, drawing her weapon. I'll hold them off. Get Polly out of here. Sarah hesitated for a split second before grabbing Polly and racing out the back door. As gunfire erupted behind them, she plunged into the dense forest, her heart pounding. Head east, Polly instructed. There's a small airfield about 10 miles from here. We might be able to find a plane. As they fled through the wilderness, Sarah's mind raced. Who had found them? How would they escape? And even if they did, where could they go that would truly be safe? The sound of pursuit grew closer. Sarah's lungs burned as she pushed herself to keep moving. She knew that if she was caught, it wouldn't just mean her life. The fate of Cornelius's groundbreaking discovery, and potentially the future of humanity, rested on her ability to outrun their pursuers. As the trees thinned and the distant shape of a small airstrip came into view, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning of an even greater challenge. Somehow, she would have to find a way to protect this world-changing technology while exposing those who would abuse it. The true test of her courage, ingenuity, and moral strength was about to begin. And as the sound of engines roared in the distance, Sarah steeled herself for whatever came next, knowing that the choices she made in the coming days would echo through history. What challenges awaited them at the airfield? How would they evade their pursuers and find a new safe haven? And most importantly, how could Sarah and Polly Cornelius ensure that this revolutionary technology would be used for the benefit of all humanity, rather than the select few? The answers to these questions would determine not just their fate, but potentially the course of human evolution itself. Part 6. The Final Gambit. The small airfield loomed ahead, a beacon of hope in the gathering dusk. Sarah's legs felt like lead, her lungs burning with each ragged breath. Polly clung tightly to her shoulder, his talons digging into her skin, a sharp reminder of the precious cargo she carried. As they burst from the tree-line, Sarah's heart sank. The airfield was deserted, save for a single small Cessna parked on the tarmac. And worse, she could hear the distant roar of engines growing closer. There, Polly squawked, gesturing with his wing. The plane... Sarah sprinted towards the aircraft, praying it wasn't locked. To her amazement, the door swung open easily. She clambered inside, her hands shaking as she searched for keys. Under the sun visor, Polly instructed, his voice a mixture of Cornelius's calm authority and avian urgency. Sure enough, a set of keys dangled there. Sarah jammed them into the ignition, silently thanking her grandfather for those flying lessons years ago. The engine sputtered to life, just as a convoy of black SUVs screeched onto the airfield. "Hold on!" Sarah yelled, taxiing the plane as fast as she dared. Bullets pinged off the fuselage as their pursuers opened fire. The small plane lurched into the air, barely clearing the trees at the end of the runway. Sarah's knuckles were white on the controls as she banked hard, setting a course east towards the coast. "We did it," she breathed, the adrenaline slowly ebbing from her system. "But where do we go now?" Polly hopped onto the co-pilot seat, his eyes reflecting the setting sun. "I have a contingency plan. There's a research facility in Iceland, off the grid, staffed by people I trust implicitly. If we can make it there, we might have a chance to finish what we started." Sarah nodded grimly, checking the fuel gauge. "We'll need to make at least one stop to refuel. Let's just hope we can stay ahead of them." As night fell and the stars emerged above the clouds, Sarah found herself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. From a simple veterinary technician to the guardian of humanity's potential future, it was almost too much to comprehend. "Cornelius," she said softly, glancing at Polly, "why did you really choose me for this? Surely there were more qualified people." The parrot was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Intelligence can be found in many places, Sarah. But wisdom, compassion, and the strength to make the right choice even when it's difficult, those are far rarer qualities. I saw those in you from the very beginning." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them away, focusing on the horizon. They had a long flight ahead, and the fate of the world quite literally rested in her hands. Hours passed in tense silence. As they approached the coast of Newfoundland for their refueling stop, Sarah's radio crackled to life. "Unidentified aircraft. This is Royal Canadian Air Force. You have entered restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately." Sarah's heart raced. If she responded, she risked alerting their pursuers to their location. If she didn't... Suddenly, Polly began squawking into the radio, producing a series of sounds that seemed like nonsense to Sarah. To her amazement, the voice on the other end responded in kind. "Understood. You are cleared for emergency landing at Goose Bay. Godspeed." Sarah stared at Polly in disbelief. "What was that?" "A little gift from Project Lazarus," Polly Cornelius explained. "The ability to communicate across species has some unexpected benefits. I've arranged for us to refuel safely, but we need to be quick. Our pursuers won't be far behind." The landing at Goose Bay was tense but uneventful. As promised, a small team was waiting to refuel their plane, working with incredible speed and efficiency. Within 20 minutes, they were airborne again, streaking across the Atlantic towards Iceland. But their troubles were far from over. Halfway across the ocean, the plane's instruments began to go haywire. "We're being jammed," Sarah realized with growing horror. "They've found us." Through the clouds behind them, she could make out the sleek shape of a much faster jet, rapidly closing the distance. "We'll never outrun them," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear. Polly's eyes gleamed with determination. "No, but we might be able to outsmart them. Sarah, I need you to trust me completely for what comes next. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded, her grip tightening on the controls. Always. What followed was the most harrowing 30 minutes of Sarah's life. Under Polly Cornelius's guidance, she executed a series of maneuvers that pushed the small plane to its limits. They dove into cloud banks, skimmed dangerously close to the waves, and at one point, cut their engines entirely to drop off the jet's radar. By the time the coast of Iceland came into view, Sarah was exhausted, exhilarated, and more than a little amazed that they were still alive. They landed at a tiny, unmarked airstrip where a team of scientists was waiting. As Sarah stumbled from the plane, legs shaky from the ordeal, she was immediately ushered into a state-of-the-art laboratory hidden beneath the barren landscape. "Welcome to the future, Miss Thompson," a silver-haired woman greeted her. "I'm Dr. Elsa Magnusson. Cornelius told us to expect you, though I must admit, we had almost given up hope." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah worked alongside Dr. Magnusson and her team, integrating the knowledge from Cornelius's journal with cutting-edge research. Together, they refined the consciousness transfer technology, building in safeguards and ethical constraints that would prevent its misuse. But even as they made progress, Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before their enemies caught up with them. The question that weighed on her mind was, what would they do with the technology once it was complete? On the fifth day, as they were running final simulations, alarms blared throughout the facility. They had been found. "We're out of time," Dr. Magnusson said grimly. "Sarah, you need to make a choice. We can destroy all our research, ensuring it never falls into the wrong hands. Or we can release it to the world," Sarah finished, understanding dawning. "If everyone has access to it, no one can control it." Polly hopped onto her shoulder, his eyes meeting hers. "The choice is yours, Sarah. This is why I chose you. Whatever you decide, I trust it will be the right path." As the sound of helicopters grew louder outside, Sarah closed her eyes, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. In her hands, she held the power to reshape human existence, to potentially end death as we know it. But with that power came unimaginable responsibility and risk. The facility shook as explosions rocked the outer defenses. Time was running out. Sarah opened her eyes, her decision made. With trembling fingers, she reached for the computer terminal. The fate of humanity hung in the balance as she prepared to either destroy or release the most revolutionary discovery in human history. What choice would Sarah make in this final moment? Would she trust humanity with the power of near immortality, or decide the risks were too great? And whatever her decision, how would she and Polly Cornelius face the forces converging on their location? As Sarah's hand hovered over the keyboard, she knew that her next action would change the course of human history forever. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited to see what this once ordinary veterinary technician, now the custodian of humanity's future, would do. The story of Sarah Thompson and Polly, of Project Lazarus and the Hawthorne legacy, was about to reach its electrifying conclusion, and the world would never be the same again.